And welcome back to Pop Culture Kaboom's a radio show on KNVC 95.1 FM in Carson City, broadcast to the greater Carson City / Reno area and live streamed to the world at knvc.org. Genesis 2 Comics was founded in 2014 by Christian Bao and Alan Ling. The two soon discovered the unforgiving learning curve that is the comics industry. Needless to say, like anything worth doing, after lots of hard work, second-guessing, pushing one's mental and artistic limits, perhaps even some drinking, and maybe even some crying, the two creative collaborators saw their dream come true. Genesis 2 Comics finally came to fruition with the completion and release of the graphic novel Genesis 2. Here to tell us about the extraordinary journey from thought to work to team to work in progress to completed project is co-founder of Genesis 2 Comics and co-creator and writer of the graphic novel Genesis 2, Mr. Alan Ling. And how are you, sir?
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Oh, no problem. So what prompted you to start? I mean, because you just recently, I was following Genesis 2 Comics beforehand, but then I saw that you guys were at the San Diego Comic-Con. I'm like, dang, that's a pretty huge step to go from, just releasing your very first company's comic book or graphic novel to, bam, being front and center at the San Diego Comic-Con. So how did Genesis 2 Comics get started?
Well, as you already mentioned, it started with kind of we don't take drugs, by the way. We just drink a lot of coffee. I was going to say crack pipe dream, but we don't do drugs. We just do coffee. And what happened was that Christian and I we both embarked on this interesting journey to become comic book, creators. And Christian and I both are, we're comic book hooked, just addicts, and we just loved them since we were, 4 or 5 years old. So what happened was, I met Christian through I had a combat martial arts instructor named Matt Lucas, and we both knew him, and Matt had known that I was trying to do a comic book, and he goes, why don't you go and hit Christian up? And Christian and I it was gelled immediately. I just think he's a great guy. And I think that's important when you're going to be doing something that's going to be, a project that lasts for years or more. And so what's happening now is Christian and I started doing it. It took us 6 months just to figure out what the art's going to look like, what the story is going to be about. And then we started writing the comic book. And little secret, we did it 5 pages at a time. We did not do a start to finish with a huge synopsis and treatment like most people do. I did it 5 pages at a time.
Wow. That's how long did it take you guys to get 5 pages set up?
Well, the first 5 pages took about 3 months. And then, I know, we kept doing a lot of false starts and then, overanalyzing things and are caught up in our own perfectionism. And then I guess the whole half of the thing got finished after 2.5 years, and then we were stuck. And part of it was, I work full-time as a physical therapist. I run my own company. I have 25 employees. So I was busy working, and I was going through a divorce at the time, so a lot of distractions. And Christian never do a comic book before, so it's an endurance contest. It's like running a marathon. And Christian's more of a fast twitch, not a slow twitch kind of guy.
Wow.
So, yeah. So we got some help by a gentleman by the name of Mel Smith. And Mel is, he won an Eisner Award for, I think it's Gumby comic book. And he kind of got us together, got our act together, and basically yelled at Christian a lot, and then shamed me a lot for just not focusing enough on getting the story going, and basically managed us, and we were able to finish the rest of the book in 6 months.
Dang, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was great. It was really stressful, but it was we wouldn't want to finish. We would have never finished if it wasn't for Mel.
So basically, what you guys needed was somebody to basically herd the cats.
Herd the retarded cats. Yeah.
Well, that's a visual image I won't get out of my head anytime soon.
Oh yeah. If it wasn't for him, we never would have made it. And he's one of the most prolific comic book producers and publishers in the industry, and he's still going for it. He's great. He did a thing called the Dead Ahead, which turns out was a lot of the, I guess the second season of Fear the Walking Dead was taken off of his comic books.
Interesting. Ooh. So after all of that, Genesis 2, the graphic novel, was born. A 136-page graphic novel, and despite its massive size, it is a really pretty quick read. I got a hold of it, and I went through it. I'm going to give a basic synopsis that you guys have on your website for Genesis2comics.com. And Genesis 2 is set in a near-future San Francisco. Humans have mastered space travel and interspecies genetic engineering. Governments are in shambles, and corporations operate as nation-states with private militia.
Yes.
So, what I found interesting is the X virus. These are kind of like little things that I found in there because it was kind of almost reminiscent in my mind. Some of the cut scenes that you guys had was reminiscent of some of the the commercials, kind of comedic commercials, also from RoboCop. So
exactly, very good catch. RoboCop, as well as some of the The Dark Knight by Frank Miller. There's a lot of, we just took a lot of the things that Kristen and I just loved from other comic books and movies, and we just stuck them in our comic book. I mean, why not, right? Don't reinvent the wheel, just make a shinier wheel.
So I got a question. Does the X virus have to do with also the rabid dolphins?
Well,
because I saw that, I'm like, I really want to know more. How do dolphins get rabies?
Well, the X virus came from the Zika virus that was going around during the time that we were writing the comic book, and that was making all the kids come out with microcephaly, the little heads.
Yeah.
And that came from that. And the dolphin thing was pretty funny. We watered down the panels. But Christian had blood coming out of the blowhorn and everything when he drew it. I go, that's too much. We gotta just make it look like it's gonna eat a person, and that's fine, But the food sources for the oceans are running out, and so the dolphins decided, well, there's plenty of people on this beach, and let's go and eat them. They just became sharks.
Nice, which would probably be a better movie than 47 Meters Uncaged.
Yes, sir.
So since that's coming out this Friday, kind of a thing that I was kind of curious about is Cap walks up to a kind of a tube, like a Bacta tank, basically, like Luke Skywalker was in, and it looks like another feline is inside this tube. But it's kind of one of those hints that are dropped that is never actually explored any further than that. Is that going to present itself in the future in the next novel? Well, we have
chapter 5 and 6 are already out. What you have is hardcover, which is chapter 1, 2. Maybe you have all 4. Do you have all 4 chapters, or just those sloppy?
I think I have all 4.
Great. So we just came out with 5 and 6, and we're working on 7 and 8. So you'll probably see some remnants of that in issue 7. We're going to go. It'll be pretty much dedicated to the genetically modified animals.
Okay, because I have a lot of questions about those, actually. Yeah.
Go for it.
Well, I mean, how does it come about? I know that in this future, humans have mastered interspecies genetic engineering, but you have wrong thing here. I hate it when that happens. I got to get to my notes. Like Ardo is a cross between a dog and an armadillo. Cap is a cross between a cat and a porcupine, and Igor is a cross between a gorilla and an eagle. But it seems like the main character, whose name escapes me because I didn't write it down for some stupid reason.
The guy.
It doesn't go into why he's the only one who's seen these kind of creations, or if he's the only one who's doing them. I know that in the beginning, chapter 1, the kind of opening sequence, they introduce you to the character and to Ardo. There's biologicals flying around in the air that get into a drone's engine and it crashes into his apartment. But is this something that's common practice with people? I'm going to get into more of them because there's a scimitar as well that was created, but that's another part that I'm going to get into in a little bit here. But as far as the main character, though, with him creating these unique kind of hybrid creatures, is that something that is, a common practice, or is he kind of unique with his creations?
He's a little bit on the unique side. I mean, in chapter 6, which are all prequels of the chapter 1 through 4, you'll find out that Daniel is sponsored by somebody. Someone's helping him with his experiments, and you'll see that in the big hardcover that you have, that it's actually Elon Musk III, the non-existent grandchild of Elon Musk himself.
Well, you know what? I was going to get into that, too, because you have Elon Musk on Mars, is one of the oldest living humans on Mars. And it kind of reminds me of like how the Simpsons have kind of predicted things within their comic or their cartoon. And I'm like, when I read that line, I'm like, it'd be really funny if like 10, 15 years from now, Elon Musk is like the first person on Mars. And then it'd be kind of like a, foreshadowing or kind of a Nostradamus moment with your guys and Genesis 2.
Yeah. I do really admire him. I know everybody thinks he's a wacko, but look at how much he's done. He's only in his early 40s. That has to say a lot about the guy. And, not to be an elitist, but I do own a Tesla. I actually bought it for my mom because she wanted a robot car to drive her to the grocery store, and it turned out the autonomous driving feature just ain't ready yet. So now I'm driving it, and I think, holy moly, what a piece of machinery. It's amazing. So I would, I just admired him so much. I didn't have a Tesla by the time when I started the whole comic book, but I had it later on, and because I just really liked him. So don't buy his stock, buy his car.
And write books about him being on Mars and other places. So
well, he didn't. He has a copy of my book.
Oh, he does.
His PR people did not send anything. They cease and desist. Because he's a good guy. He's one of the people that actually try to make the world better.
I wonder if he's kind of pinned that page up on his wall in his office and says "goal."
Elon Musk actually did some of his own comic books too.
Really?
He actually did a comic book called Rocket Man. He has this guy sitting in a Tesla Roadster.
That's funny.
Pretty funny.
Wow.
He likes comic books. He's an interesting guy.
Yeah, he is. So that's going on with at least with Genesis 2, with as far as the genetic engineering aspect. But then there's some other things that weren't gotten into with Lisa and her prosthetics. Her cybernetic implants, or however you want to phrase it, because they're not really prominent in the comic book. But when you guys went to San Diego Comic-Con, you had an actress who full-on was cosplaying as Lisa with the robot legs, the robot arm, the cybernetic attachments on her face. Really cool pictures, by the way.
Thank you.
I was reposting those on the Pop Culture Kaboom newsfeed when you guys were putting them out when you guys were at the San Diego Comic-Con. How come that wasn't actually focused on with or will it be focused on in the future as far as the comic?
It is actually Chapter 5 talks all about how that happened.
Well, I need to I only got up to Chapter 4 then.
You gotta you know how to get a hold of me. I'll send you Chapters 5 and 6.
Okay. Awesome. So with the whole thing, if you're interested in checking out, I know that right now Chapter 1 is a free download at Genesis 2 Comics or not Facebook, but you guys'
website?
Yes, that's the word I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
Just go to Genesis, and believe it or not, it's iicomics.com. And when it comes up,
they can also do Genesis and the number 2 comics.com, and that'll also, we just got as many of those website names as we can, and they can type in any of that stuff, and that'll they'll be able to get the download for free.
Awesome. So if you guys want to check out Genesis 2 graphic novel up to and for free for the first chapter, and then you can look at how you can purchase it from there. Some interesting other things though is there's a kind of the setup is a very heavy-handed dystopianism, but you guys really don't go into it too much as far as, it kind of has a Blade Runner-esque feel to it with the way the city is and everything at that time. But the geopolitical, all the weirdness and all that stuff hasn't really gotten into. Is that something that's going to be explored in future chapters, or is that something?
Yeah. Yes, we will. In Chapter 8, we introduced a character in Chapter 6, and that person will be brought back for Chapter 8. And we came up with a character by the name of Rhonda Lynch, and she's actually one of the first woman Navy SEALs. And she comes back in Chapter 8, and it'll expose the whole history of how half our new world is now ruled by terrorist organizations. So we saw during the time that Chris and I were writing it, we saw one of the countries in the Middle East being, the government toppled by ISIS. And I said, oh boy, this is not good, because if they can do that to a government, what's to stop a terrorist organization to do it to other governments? So we just said, okay, let's amplify that and just make it so that half the world has been governments, the Democratic or whatever governments have been toppled by terrorist organizations.
That's going to definitely an interesting plot line. It sounds like you guys got so many threads going on with this comic book.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, between the cyber enhancements, I just call generic hoods and or militiamen or anything like that the Goon Squad. But even when Lisa punches one of them and knocks his helmet off, he's got cyber enhancements. You got the combat suits that the main character ends up in, as well as the main antagonist as well. He ends up in an interesting and rather large combat suit. And actually, that was kind of, a little bit of a spoiler, but the note to self, neck and head protection next time. Does that mean he's going to return?
I'm not going to say, because that'll be fun. That was kind of a joke, because here's this guy coming out. He's got this huge, heavy-duty kind of, amazing robot, armor on, and he doesn't protect his neck or his head.
I know. I was thinking that too when I first saw that suit. I'm like, why doesn't he have a helmet of some sort? I mean, that's kind of goofy. Then boom. Okay, now we know where. But then that phrase kind of stuck with me, because I'm like, is that some kind of like foreshadowing that he's going to be returning? Because that could have interesting implications as far as, with the whole genetic engineering and all that stuff too.
Yeah.
So.
You're sharp. Like genetic engineering, I mean, you could you can clone yourself, right?
True.
And there's what's nice about, there are 20 stories in the 4 chapters that you have. There's 20 stories, and we're pulling from the foundation of that book, pulling all the stories out from the book itself. So, we could write another 20 chapters, which we already done 2 of them. We're going to do 2 more. Then we'll see what happens as far as whether any other, like Netflix or other some movie studio is going to pick up the idea. And that's another crack pipe dream I have. But it's fairly plausible if you just keep going at it that eventually the Marvel and the DC stuff will wear out. Because guess what? Those things are 50 years old. You'd think they would wear out eventually.
You'd think, but they haven't yet, which is,
Yeah.
And, Bill wanted to say something.
Maybe I can hold off until we move out of the break, because we got to move into the break right now.
Yeah, we're at a hard break here. So, everybody, I am speaking with Mr. Alan Ling. He is the co-creator and writer of the graphic novel Genesis 2 and co-founder of Genesis 2 Comics. We're discussing Genesis 2, the graphic novel. More to talk about with it, where it's going, more with what happened with them at the San Diego Comic-Con. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and feel free to contact me either through the Pop Culture Kaboom Facebook page, and I will ask him any question you have, or you can call 775-515-4141, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to Pop Culture Kaboom radio show. Lisa, a scientist researching groundbreaking and potentially world-ending technology, has attracted the attention of a malevolent. Oh man, I can't speak. Malevolent.
Malevolent?
That's the word I was looking for. Holy moly! Corporate tyrant Daniel, along with his GMO animal hybrid guardians, no GMOs, fights to rescue Lisa and prevent global genocide. So, a GMO hybrid guardians, and we're talking about Ardo, Cap, and Igor.
Yes.
Okay, I keep thinking I'm going to say that wrong because I keep thinking of Young Frankenstein. It's not Igor, it's Igor.
Yeah, Igor,
so,
Eagle Gorilla.
So, I think after reading what I have so far of the graphic novel up to chapter 4, my biggest gripe is Barbar Jinx.
That is my most least favorite character of the whole Star Wars series, and so we put in, instead of Jar Jar Binks, we put in Barbar Binks. And we heard him a lot.
Yeah, you did.
Yes, we did. And so that was our own little joke, because we, of course, everybody, the Star Wars fan, but there were some things that we didn't like about Star Wars, and that was one of them. Although George Lucas says that was his favorite character.
Well,
the guy was still laid back.
Okay. You know what? True story. Me and my little brother, because we grew up with Star Wars. We saw A New Hope at the drive-in with our parents in 1977. Of course, I was only 7 years old at the time, but Star Wars was our thing. We grew up with it. It was our big. I think like every kid back then, at least in male. That was Star Wars was the bomb.
I think everybody wanted to see it.
Yeah, but but guys were like into it more than girls were. At least when it seemed like it. So when they said they were going to do episode 1, 2, and 3, I'm like, okay, they're prequels, so I'm not too excited about it. But so me and my little brother went to see it. The minute Jar Jar Binks showed up on that screen, I was in the middle of a full packed theater, and I'm yelling, "Kill it!" Everybody's turning around and glaring at me. But the worst character ever made. I hated that character from the moment he stepped on screen. So I'm glad, and actually that was my first thought too when I was reading the comic book, and all of a sudden, he looks kind of like I'm trying to remember the actual rabbit character, but there's this comic book character. He's a rabbit. He's green, but the minute he started talking, I'm like, oh God, why is he talking like Jar Jar Binks? This is.
You know what? We got his speech from the Jar Jar Binks our translator that's online. If you go online to Jar Jar Binks translator, you can actually type in what you want to say in English, and it comes out in Jar Jar Binks.
Are you kidding? Someone actually spent the time and energy to make that?
That's where I got all that stuff. I used that translator. So, yeah.
I'm sorry. For someone who didn't like the character, you had to do an awful lot of research on him.
Oh, we did, because we didn't want to. We wanted to still kind of make it a little bit weird. And by the way, I had a former girlfriend who was kind of in law school, and she goes, "You're going to need to not make him a big character, or they might come after you." And so I said, "Oh, okay." So I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I'm sure you'll be happy with the way he winds up.
So after chapter 4, because I kind of saw the big climatic battle.
Yeah.
And so is he around after that?
I don't think so.
Oh, good. Thank God. Because I did say that when I saw that panel. I'm like, good.
Okay, good. I'm glad you liked the outcome. We enjoyed doing that to him.
So, but some other interesting things that came out of that big climatic battle was the scimitar. And it was a 2-second fight with Igor, but anyway, the scimitar was an interesting looking creature, and there was of course, everybody has to have their back to tanks with all the. As you can tell, I'm using the Star Wars references there and he had a bunch of other critters also in these back to tanks. So the scimitar wasn't alone. So there's possibly more in upcoming chapters.
Yeah, I mean, the other ones just weren't ready yet to be released, and he wasn't ready to let them all loose. So we always kind of kept an option for some of these other things to show up later on. I'll tell you a little sad story about all this stuff. I had another girlfriend. I have lots of girlfriends. I had another girlfriend of mine. She's ex now. Her brother was in prison, and he was in state prison in Arizona. And he was drawing up a lot of the other monsters that the antagonist, which his name is Franklin Voight, was creating with human DNA and animal DNA. And he drew about probably 70 of them. And unfortunately, when he got released from prison, he died 2 weeks later.
Oh, well, that's a bummer.
So I never got a chance to get him to Comic-Con. I never got a chance to get him out of prison and talk to him and take him out to dinner. But I was able to give him some money while he was in prison to draw the things, and that was really good. But I visited him once, and he didn't make it out alive. So I dedicated one of the books to him, and I'm going to take all his drawings, and we're going to probably use some of the pre-production drawings that he made to turn it into some of the creatures that might be in the future issues. And his name is Robert Morris, Morriss. And he passed away about a little over a year ago.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was tough.
Well, I'm glad you're going to be memorializing him in his artwork in future issues. So that's a good thing. But to kind of get away from the depressing.
Yeah, now go back to happy stuff, because not everything's all happy, but I try to just make sure that it's real. Everybody has to understand there's I'm one of the lucky guys because I didn't start doing comic books until I was in my 50s. I'm going to be 50. I just turned 58. But I still have, people say I'm very immature, so I'll definitely stay young that way.
Well, there you go. Hey, that's what Stan Lee did. I think he was in his late 40s when he actually started Marvel Comics. So
that's great. That's good to know. I did not know that. That's excellent. Thank God.
Yeah, it's amazing the useless information I have in my head.
Yeah.
Yes, Bill.
Yeah. I was wondering, you're in the physical therapy business as well. Does that translate to comics at all? I mean, do you see us going in that direction? Are we kind of cyborging ourselves with replacing different bits and pieces of ourselves as we age and get older?
Yep, we have people with hip replacements. We have people who are getting cataract surgery. We have people, bionic eyes, and we're, get stents in our heart where if our arteries are clogged. They're replacing little bits of us all the time. I mean, it's not a bad thing. Medical technology is really.
How far is that going to go? And where is it in the comic genre? I mean, of course, you could replace the whole human being, of course, in a comic book. But how far will it go?
I think we don't want to dehumanize our characters to the point where people say, it's just a bunch of robots beating up each other. But you look at what we're doing with our society. We just have virtual reality coming up, or we could just use virtual reality things to fight and box each other. It's part of our entertainment. People are buying, those very sophisticated love dolls. They don't have to worry about that anymore. People are can I talk about this stuff? Anyway, they're surfing.
As long as you don't get into too much detail about what they do with those dolls.
Yeah. Okay. So people surf materials on the internet. I mean, you go to some of these other countries, people don't really feel like they need a relationship anymore. I mean, people now don't feel like they need a relationship anymore. And I'm a relationship person. I love people. I just went into physical therapy so I can help people. Comic books, I mainly was kind of to help me, but that's another way to reach out to people and entertain them and, make them lose themselves and, maybe forget about their problems for a little bit, just reading a comic book. I used to read comic books and forget about everything. It was great. It was a great escape.
Yeah, it was. I remember, well, I still read comic books, but as you can see. I got a couple of more questions pertaining to the San Diego Comic-Con. You had, first off, you had Ardo, Cap, and Igor there with you in 3D rendered statues. Now, were those actual size?
Yeah.
Because those were huge.
Yeah, and they're that's why I still have to work. I have to ship those from Canoga Park, which are in storage, to San Diego in 5 gigantic crates, and they're like probably total like 3,000 or 4,000 pounds because the crates are heavy too, to protect each one of the models. And the models are museum quality models. They're not made out of paper mache or something. They actually look real. And so it's those are one of the things that probably got me into Comic-Con, is that I'm just saying, I've got one chance to do this right, and I need to come in a big way and advertise to people that I'm serious about what I'm doing. So I went to WonderCon, and WonderCon was Comic-Con Junior, right? San Diego Comic-Con Junior. They're pretty much the same people. And so I went to WonderCon, and I took all this stuff with me, and I don't think the con people understood. They thought I had these little teeny models. They stuck me in the back of the convention center. They didn't know where I was, and they just said, "Oh, shoot." When they saw what I brought, they said, "You have the best booth in the whole con." And not best because we're selling something, because we're a comic book company. We're a comic book, and we came and we showed that, hey, here's our characters, and they're life-size, and they look real. And we want to capture people's imagination. We became unfortunately became more of a photo opportunity than we became selling any comic books. People just came and snapped photos.
Should have just started charging them, $5 a photo.
Yeah, we went. So it was kind of interesting, but it attracted enough attention for us to get into Comic-Con to San Diego. So we got in with 2 months' notice to get into Comic-Con. It is a 5 to 6 year waiting list to get into San Diego Comic-Con.
Now that's impressive. That you got in 2 months, and it takes forever to get into San Diego.
I begged and begged and begged. By the way, I kept pinging them. Can you please let me in? Can you please let me in? So, I guess that helps if you were being positive and not whining about the bad placement in WonderCon. I was just very happy about getting the opportunity to get in, and I'm looking at possibly going back to WonderCon again, but I've got to look at how much money I have to do it, and it looks like I might be able to go back. Each convention costs thousands of dollars.
Yeah,
there's booth fees and getting your staff and hotels. I think people who fool themselves in thinking comic books are, you just draw a comic book. It is a whole industry of marketing, as well as printing and publishing, and I'm possibly getting a distribution contract with Diamond, which is the only distributor of comic books in Canada and the U.S.
Yeah, well, Comixology too, but that's more online.
Yeah.
But well, I'm kind of curious, since you have these full-scale 3D rendered statues of your main GMO hybrid guardians, when can we expect a toy line?
I think that someone's going to have to come and do some divine intervention for me, because I think I'm focusing more on doing more comic books and doing Genesis, but I've also started a couple of other comic book projects where there's one that's for more mature audiences, because the Genesis is actually pretty global. People who are 11 to 12 can enjoy it, and people who are 75 can enjoy it. These other ones are a little bit deeper and darker. So I wrote one after I broke up with one of my other girlfriends, and it's a heartbreaking one, but it's all science fiction. But it's all dramatic stories based on people not getting along. So yeah,
it sounds like science fiction.
Yeah, it's not science fiction. That's like real. And then I have another one. I'm doing some adult comic books too, and some of them I can't talk about it because I haven't copyrighted everything yet. But they're humorous. They're kind of like drawn in the form of like Archie comic books. But there's some things that are sexual in nature and I try to put some humor in it, and we'll see how those come out.
Well, for a second there, when you said I also have an adult comic book coming out, but I can't really talk about that, I really started getting my imagination going. I was like, okay, brown chicken, brown cow. There we go.
That's really good.
At this point in time, with Genesis 2 Comics, you have your flagship graphic novel. You have a couple of other titles that are going to be coming out soon. So the line is growing. Are you going to be? Can you foresee in the near future possibly picking up or looking at bringing on other, say, titles from other creators?
Yeah, we were approached at Comic-Con by some other folks, and some of the stories were good, and some of the art, unfortunately the art wasn't, and again, I have to be picky as a publisher, some of the art wasn't up to standards that, we would like. And we're always improving the art. I'm new to this thing, but every comic book we put out, we get better and better and better. It's a learning curve. And, we keep, the whole point is to keep trying to improve yourself. It's not about, okay, that's good enough, you stop. You got to keep getting better. So where I have Nate Van Dyke, who he is an artist who draws a lot for heavy metal, and he drew a lot for heavy metal. He drew a chimpanzee character named Dutch. I have another guy named Manuel Martinez, and Manuel does just his drawings for DC and Marvel. So I'm bringing on other artists. I'm actually in contact with an artist in Italy and another one in London. And we're bringing everybody together to start working on projects together. So it's really, I'm kind of like the producer of all the things, but at the same time, I'm also the recruiter of all these different artists.
So it sounds like you're taking the editor-in-chief position as well as co-founder.
Yeah, what do you call it? Someone called me creative wizard. I like wizards.
I like that title.
Yeah, it's kind of. I'll take that title. So it's been fun, and I do art editing. I definitely do the art direction, but at the same time, I try to stay out of the way of the artists because I want them to be free to create and really feel like they have ownership in each one of the comic book novellas that we do.
Well, I am unfortunately at another hard break, and this is fortunately the last one of the show. Unfortunately, though, there's only 20 minutes left of the show, but I still got a lot more to talk about what's next for Genesis 2 Comics, as well as the characters from Genesis 2, and possibly how this could look as an animated series. My thoughts on that, a TV show as well, and other things. But unfortunately, we got to do that after the break. So we will be right back after these messages. And welcome back to Pop Culture Kaboom, our radio show on KNBC 95.1 FM, broadcasting to the greater Carson City / Reno area and live streamed to the world at knbc.org. I'm speaking with Mr. Alan Ling, and he is the co-founder of Genesis 2 Comics and the co-creator and writer for the graphic novel Genesis 2, being printed out by Genesis 2 Comics. And we've been discussing the graphic novel and your guys' appearance at Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con. Do you have any appearances coming up in the near future?
We actually do not. We're going to wait till probably WonderCon, which is in March, and then we're going to go back to Comic-Con in July. So it's kind of what we're anticipating on doing. There's someone else has asked me, would you want to do more conventions? And I said, well, I'll have to shrink those models down because each time we move them, it's a few $1,000s to move them each one way and a couple $1,000s to set them up.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine it. And how much do those things weigh each? I mean, because Cap has to weigh a lot. Yeah,
Cap weighs, he's the lightest one, actually, because he has a foam body, and he weighs about 100, the actual weight of the statue is 150 pounds. But
wow.
He, in reality, weighs 300. In the cartoon, he weighs 300. And then Ardo, he actually weighs 300 pounds. That because we have steel going through the statue because he's balancing on one leg. So we put a giant piece of steel through the statue to keep him from falling over.
Wow.
And then he probably weighs more than 300. And then Igor, the actual statue and the arms, and we have a wall that we built to hold them down. That's a couple 1,000 pounds. Really heavy.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah.
Wow. You definitely got to figure out a way to shrink those down. A toy line would be great because then you don't have to. But is Lisa going to be joining you at your next outings as well?
We have a mannequin that we can actually put the prosthetics on. The poor model, she was pretty worn out in that thing, and it's hard to pull on and off to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then just because she was moving around in it so much, the metallic paint that was on it literally started coming off.
Oof.
After you could only, supposedly, if you're actually using it for a movie, for example, they would have people there always taking care of the thing hour on the hour, the actor too, people helping pull on and off the thing. But we didn't have what we call a wrangler or a person to help us take it on and off, and so the costume got damaged quite a bit.
That's a bummer.
Sounds like a real cosplay challenge for the fans.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that could be a reworked as well. A little bit cheaper, a little bit easier on the person wearing.
Yeah, it's actually a one-piece costume, so I'm thinking maybe we should cut. The arms should not be attached to the legs, kind of, because it's all one piece, and the person has to slip one thing in and slip the other stuff in. So imagine having to take off the arm in order to take down the pants in order to use the bathroom.
Nope, can't imagine that. That would be too much work for me.
Yeah.
Before we went to break, we were discussing branching out, and actually, there's a gentleman. His name is Chris Johnson. I've interviewed him on my show before. He's a comic book creator. He has a comic book coming out called Hoodie. But he's more of a writer, but he also is a freelance colorer and also a letterer.
Wow.
But somebody in that kind of that side of the profession, if it's somebody that you're looking for, or somebody who does that kind of freelance like he does, would it behoove them to contact you?
Yeah. I'm always looking for more talent. I mean, we're trying to build our brand right now because, besides Genesis 2 Comics, we have a larger umbrella company called Gen 7 Comics, which is all about, doing more varieties of different kinds of comic books. And people ask me, are you going to be the next Marvel or DC? And I said, I don't know what I'm going to be. I'm just going to keep growing and keep refining what we're doing so that we can put out quality comic books like the old days. Back in the 90s, there were some really good comic books being drawn and done. And now it's just kind of hit and miss. I see a lot less of it, except the stuff that's coming out of Europe. The Europeans still value art more than I think this American culture does. So, yeah, so I still see a lot of good art coming from Europe.
So, what the next step with Genesis 2? Can you see it or being a television show, or would you more focus, say, more along the lines of animation? I think personally, maybe it's because that one still that you guys have on your website on the cover page is that white background with all the main characters right there, kind of side by side.
Yeah.
I feel that just from that kind of is a good representation of how it would appear as a animated series rather than live action.
And you'll be happy to know many people in the industry share your opinion.
Yay. But is somebody doing something about it?
Well, I think a lot of them are waiting to see if I have the stamina to keep going, because you don't want to be a flash in the pants and then you're gone. So there's it's funny that no one's going to help you until you prove that you're able to have some staying power in the industry. And, a lot of people ask, is this the only book? I said, no, I keep coming out with more stuff. And so once you have a whole bunch of intellectual property and, you're not desperate and a whole bunch of things, then they'll start to take more interest in you. I've been approached already. My thing is I definitely need to possibly get some kind of screenplay going and, maybe get an agent. I have Michael Brandvold who does my branding and my marketing for me, but the representation in Hollywood means you're serious, and you have to basically obtain, and to get anywhere you have to attain some kind of representation down there. Not necessarily a lawyer, but a person who can actually connect you with everybody else and take a percentage of whatever that connection will get.
And a lawyer also helps. True, trust me.
Oh yeah, I have 7 or 8 lawyers who help me do all sorts of stuff.
Holy moly!
Yeah, that's what happens when you run. I run more than one company. So I'm always, but comics are my escape. I mean, this is my thing that I enjoy doing. The other stuff is also enjoyable, but it is also stressful.
Work.
Yeah.
Yes, Bill.
Work, you call it a job.
I was wondering, are there any opportunities outside of Hollywood? I mean, independent projects or things like that might work?
I'm working on a music video right now because I also write and produce music, and so I'm doing that, and then hopefully it'll be on Spotify. I do a lot of things now because my kids are all grown up and they're off my payroll. And
they're off your payroll.
They're off my payroll, and I'm at a stage now, and I guess everybody should hopefully get there where they're at a stage where they can actually try to enjoy their creative part of themselves. And I always encourage everybody, look, if there's something you really love, try to practice doing that earlier so that when you're retired all of a sudden, you're not so arthritic and beat down that you can't do it. I'm not talking about physical things, but even art is physical. You have to hold a posture for a certain length of time. You got to sit in front of a computer. If you're doing digital art, it's hard. And as a physical therapist, I could see, wow, I better start doing this thing sooner and then keep my body in really good shape so I can, enjoy what I'm doing and travel. I have to travel, back and forth between L.A. and here. It's a lot of, schlepping around.
Yeah, it is. I went a music route and I've done some touring, and man, that'll.
Well,
Oh yeah, that'll drain you quick.
And I would think that most folks would think of this as a young man's game, and well, I'm sorry, but you're not really a young man anymore, is it?
No,
is it harder?
I challenge people to not think of being too old to do. I mean, yeah, you might be too old to pole vault. Okay? There's still some guys out there pole vaulting who are like in their 80s. And so they're just not jumping as high. So my thing is, if you want to do something, you just got to set your mind to it. You have to have the resources, including time, to be able to start working on it again. And I'm not. I worked 80 hours a week, 100 hours a week when I was a younger man to establish myself. And unfortunately, I gave all my earnings to my two ex-wives, but that's okay. I just worked harder. Worked harder afterwards, So yeah. So it's everything's fine. I mean, what's funny is that people think that that there's a point where you need to give up, and I think when my heart stops beating, that's when I'm going to give up. Good time then.
Right on.
Right now.
I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Exactly. That's actually an approach a lot of people think I take to life too. They're like, "Why do you get up so early?" Well, and then they're like, "Well, what time do you go to bed?" And I'm like, "I don't know, 1, 2 o'clock." And you get up at 6:30? Yeah. Why? Because I got stuff to do. I got music. I got writing. I do all this other stuff that I do. So.
But it's great because that actually makes you want to live. Because if you don't have something to live for, you're going to die even sooner. I don't think people realize that you can. I mean, sleep is important, rest is important, recreation is important, but there's certain things where you want to accomplish something, and I know some people who they spend way too much time on social media, and and I love sports just as much as everybody else does, but people get hooked on just watching sports all the time, and it's a great way to be passive, and then your life's going to be over, and you'll say, hey, I watched a lot of great games, but you didn't do anything. I said, well, okay, what else did you do? But, I can go into the whole reason why, we're supposed to be just entertaining ourselves by doing nothing. But, my entertainment is by creating. And some people are creators, and some people are destroyers, and some people follow. I'm hoping that, like I said, I'm hoping this thing becomes something bigger. But if it doesn't, I still have my comic books.
Yeah.
It's okay.
You created them, and they are yours. So that's always a way to look at it.
Mel Smith. That was from my editor, Mel Smith, who's been doing it for decades. He says, Alan, even if your thing becomes a movie and it's a flop, you still have your comic books. And I'm thinking, that's one good way of looking at it.
That's true. Well, and then the movie could turn out so horrible that you decide to do it yourself, like Todd McFarlane is doing with Spawn.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what the future is going to be like at all, and I don't want to predict what things are going to be like. But there's, you want to work toward a goal, and so I'm always working toward it without being realistic. I use a lot of my business skills in Hollywood, and I realize a lot of people in Hollywood are not very good business people. and And then the people who are really good business people are not very good creators. And
Interesting.
it's like the same thing. You're right. It's the music industry all over again, where the agent represents the musician has the talent, the agent has the business wherewithal. It should be a symbiotic relationship, but it's sometimes a very adversarial one.
Yeah, which is very bizarre, which very confusing to me too. But it is what it is, right?
Yes, it is.
All right, so Genesis 2 Comics, I have liked and followed them on the Facebook, so every time that you post about upcoming appearances or anything news-related, announcements, anything like that, I automatically will be reposting it in the Pop Culture Kaboom news feed. And
Thank
also,
you very much.
Oh, no problem. If you are interested in checking out Genesis 2 Comics, they are on the Facebook at Genesis 2 Comics or Genesis II Comics, or just look for their posts in the Pop Culture Kaboom newsfeed and just click on the link. Other than that, if you want to go and check out their website, genesis2comics.com, there you can go and download the first chapter of Genesis 2 graphic novel and check it out for yourself and get to know Ardo and Cap and Igor and see the scimitar, even though he's not there that long. By the way, what was the scimitar supposed to be anyway?
He was supposed to be half human and half scimitar. It's an animal called a scimitar.
A horse, isn't it?
I don't know. It had horns.
Centaur?
It looked like a
bull.
The scimitar has big horns.
No, it looked like a demon. It was pretty cool looking. Too bad it didn't last that long.
Jimmy, we just gotta kill that thing off.
Well, I did see it. I saw, and I was trying to figure it out.
Yeah, with the horns and the orange, and I was like, okay, so if this is supposed to be a hybrid, what the hell? I was a little lost on that one, so I figured I'd ask, but I thought that was like one of the cooler looking ones. So unfortunately, it was like
this is humanoid. It's got human DNA and it's got animal DNA, which is why it's kind of slow and stupid.
Because of the human DNA? Oh, I'm kidding.
It's also super stupid. Yeah.
Well, sir, I do appreciate you being on the show, and I look forward to where Genesis 2 is going from here. And I will be following, and you're welcome back anytime. If I'd love to talk to you some more with anything that comes up in the future.
That'd be great, and I really appreciate you guys having me on the show, and I cannot thank you enough. And like I said, I think I have your email, so what I can do is try to send you something about the other comic books and see if I can send that stuff to you directly, okay?
Awesome. I'd appreciate that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, sir. And, of course, with the music, that means that we're at the end of the show.